Why being a good person is more important than being rich. This one Stoic truth will make you rethink your entire life, more valuable than millions. When I was 19, I met a man who changed everything I believed about success. He was sitting on a crumbling bench outside a train station, wearing a coat with more holes than buttons, staring off into the distance like he'd seen the world collapse and rebuild itself 1,000 times. I walked past him a dozen times before curiosity made me stop. Something about him was still. Not sad, not angry, just profoundly still. I offered him some food, and he looked up at me and smiled, not with the kind of smile you give out of politeness, but with the kind of smile that says, "Thank you for seeing me." We ended up talking for hours. His name was Marcus, homeless for almost a decade, no job, no family, no social media presence, but this man had more peace in his soul than most billionaires have in their entire net worth. And I'll never forget what he said to me. "I've had everything, and I've had nothing. Only when I had nothing did I realize who I actually was. And it turns out, I liked that person." That's the moment it hit me like a lightning bolt. We spend so much of our lives chasing money, prestige, status, but the only real wealth is in character. What if I told you that everything we've been taught about success, money, power, luxury, is just a distraction from the one thing that actually matters, being good? And what if the most powerful ancient wisdom in the world has been telling us this exact truth for over 2,000 years? Today, we're going to uncover a truth that most people will never hear until it's too late. A truth that could completely flip the way you look at your life, your goals, your values. If you've ever felt like you're doing everything right but something's still missing, you need to hear this. Let's start with a punch in the gut. The Stoics, those ancient warriors of wisdom, didn't believe that money had any power over you unless you let it. Seneca was a millionaire by Roman standards, but he practiced poverty every month. He chose to sleep on the floor, eat plain bread, and wear rough clothes, just to make sure he didn't depend on luxury. Why? Because he knew, if your happiness relies on anything outside yourself, you're already a slave. Let me ask you something personal. When was the last time you judged yourself by your kindness rather than your paycheck? Be honest. Most of us, if we're being real, spend more time obsessing over our bank account than the legacy of our character. But the Stoics would argue, that's the ultimate trap. Epictetus, born a slave, said something I can't shake. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. He was born with nothing, but he lived with more power than most kings because he mastered the one thing money can't touch, his own mind. Now, here's where this gets real. Let's go into a real-world challenge. Imagine this. You're offered two paths. On one path, you're guaranteed financial freedom, $10 million, just handed to you. But to take it, you must lie to someone who trusts you, step on a few people to get ahead, and carry a weight on your conscience for the rest of your life. The second path offers you no money at all. But on this road, you become the person you're proud of, the person your future kids would admire, the one who tells the truth even when it hurts, who helps when no one's watching, who sacrifices for what's right. Which path would you take? Don't answer quickly, sit with it. Because here's the Stoic curveball. You already chose the first path. If your daily actions are aimed at wealth more than virtue. See, Stoicism isn't about being passive. It's about power, true power, the kind that makes you bulletproof to fortune. Riches can be taken, jobs can be lost, but virtue? That's yours, always. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, wrote every night about how to be a good man. Not a rich man, not a powerful ruler, just a good human. He said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." And that's the wake-up call we all need. In my own life, there was a time I was making more money than I ever thought I would. I was working insane hours, saying yes to every opportunity, optimizing everything, my time, my health, even my relationships. But you know what wasn't optimized? My soul. One night, I looked in the mirror and asked myself, would I admire me if I weren't me? And the silence that followed? It was deafening. We think we can buy respect, but respect that's bought isn't real. You earn it by your integrity, your kindness, your consistency. There was a day I chose to walk away from a huge deal. It could have changed my financial future forever, but it required me to twist the truth. Just a little, just enough to make me feel sick. And so I walked, and I'll never forget the look on the face of the guy who offered it to me. Like I'd just committed social suicide. But you know what happened next? I walked out of that building, breathed in the cold night air, and felt a peace that no paycheck has ever given me. Because I'd passed a test most people don't even know they're taking. That's the game Stoicism plays. It doesn't ask you how much you make. It asks you who you are when no one's looking. So let's try a challenge. For 1 week, track how many decisions you make just for money. Then track how many you make for virtue, for honesty, generosity, humility, courage. Compare them. The numbers might just break your heart. But they could also change your life. Because the truth is, being good doesn't always pay. But being good is always worth it. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the richest people in history weren't the ones with castles and cars, but the ones who left behind a soul so bright. The world still feels its warmth. What kind of wealth do you want to be remembered for? Because the next part of this journey gets even deeper. We're about to step into a scenario where Stoic virtue collides with brutal real-life choices. Ones that test not just your mind, but your entire identity. He was offered everything, but walked away. Why? Let me take you to a scene that'll haunt you, in the best way. A close friend of mine, let's call him Daniel, was offered the dream, a senior position at a major firm, 6-figure signing bonus, stock options, the works. But there was a catch. He had to take over from someone who was being forced out unfairly. A kind man, close to retirement, who had mentored Daniel just a few years prior. Now pause. Just imagine being in Daniel's shoes. Your whole life, you've been grinding, waiting for that one moment when it all pays off. And now, it's here. But it's laced with betrayal. Daniel could have said yes and no one would have blamed him. The company framed it like a restructuring. A clean transition, legal, normal, but he would know the truth. That he succeeded at the cost of someone else's dignity. He told me later, it felt like they were handing me gold. But the box was soaked in blood. So he walked, said no. And he didn't get another offer like that for years. But every time he sees his reflection, he doesn't flinch. You can't hang that kind of peace in a mansion. You can't trade it on the stock market. That's the kind of wealth that only comes from Stoic courage, from choosing what's right over what's easy. And when I think about that story, I always ask myself, what would I have done? What would you have done? Because here's where we go even deeper. Stoicism is not about comfort. It's about clarity. It's about stripping everything down to this one question. What kind of person are you when the lights go out? And let me tell you, this world will test you. Every day, we're bombarded with messages telling us that we're not enough until we have more. More money, more followers, more stuff. But Stoicism flips that upside down. It says, you are enough when you are just. You are wealthy when you need less. You are powerful when you control yourself. I'll never forget one of the hardest lessons I learned. A few years ago, I lost a deal that would have changed everything for me. It wasn't even my fault. Someone lied, twisted a few facts, and I got the fallout. And in that moment, I had two choices: retaliate or reflect. The old me would have gone scorched earth. But I paused, took a breath, remembered Epictetus's words. If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. And I realized, revenge would only turn me into the very thing I hated. So I let it go, not because I was weak, but because I was free. And what happened after that? I met people who truly valued honesty. Doors opened that I didn't even know existed. But more importantly, I slept well. Because I hadn't let someone else's actions rewrite my character. That's the Stoic superpower. You don't get to control the world, but you always control your response. Now, let's bring this to your life. Think about a time you had to make a choice. Between being liked and being honest. Between looking successful and being true to your values. Between short-term gain and long-term integrity. What did you choose? And more importantly, what would you choose, knowing what you know now? This is why being a good person matters more than being rich. Because riches are loud, flashy. They convince you that you're winning. But character? It's quiet, and it never lies to you. Let me give you a scene from ancient Rome. Cato the Younger, one of the most hardcore Stoics ever, stood up to Julius Caesar. Caesar was rising in power, offering people wealth, influence, comfort, and Cato? He stood alone. He refused bribes, refused compromise, refused to abandon the republic. People called him stubborn, foolish, but you know what they never called him? Dishonest. He lost everything, except his soul. And today, over 2,000 years later, we still remember Cato as the standard of virtue. Not because he won, but because he stayed good when everything around him turned dark. So let me ask you this. When your name is just a memory, what will people say? She was rich. He was successful. Or will they say, they were good, and they made me want to be good too? That's the legacy Stoicism offers us. Here's something crazy you'll never hear on most channels. Your true resume isn't your LinkedIn profile. It's not your portfolio. It's written in the hearts of people you touch. And every time you act with kindness, courage, or humility, you add to it. I once met a janitor at a hospital. I was there visiting a friend who just had surgery. This man, probably in his 60s, was wiping the floor, humming, joyful. Every nurse greeted him like family. Patients smiled when he passed. I asked one of the nurses, "How long has he worked here?" She said, 32 years. He's the soul of this place. That hit me hard. Because that man, in a job most people would overlook, had become wealthier in human spirit than people who manage billions. Because he showed up, every day, with love. That's Stoicism in motion, not in marble statues or scrolls, but in the daily, quiet commitment to goodness. So here's a challenge, a real one. The next time you're in a moment of choice, do I bend the truth? Do I ignore the need? Do I walk away from the hard thing? Ask yourself this. Would I be proud to tell my future child what I chose? That single question will clarify your values faster than anything else. And if you're still not sure, imagine you're on your deathbed. No more chances, no more deals, just you, your breath, and the life you lived. What will you regret? Not making that extra $10,000? Or the time you didn't stand up for someone? Not buying that car? Or the lie you let slide because it helped you fit in? The Stoics teach us that death isn't something to fear. It's something to use, as a tool, a lens to see clearly. Because when we live as if death could visit any moment, suddenly, being good becomes urgent. So why be a good person? Because it's the only thing that death can't steal from you. And when you start living that way, intentionally, boldly, simply, something wild happens. You attract the right people. You build inner confidence, and you begin to feel that deep, unshakable alignment between your soul and your life. And guess what? That's when you really become unstoppable. In our next segment, I'll take you through a life and death decision made by a Stoic during a war, and the mind-blowing lesson it teaches us about the price of virtue. And why it's still worth paying. He chose death over dishonor, and became immortal. Picture this. The year is 68 AD. The Roman Empire is on fire with political chaos. Nero, the emperor known for extravagance and cruelty, is hunting down anyone who opposes him. And in a dimly lit home in Rome, a man named Seneca is calmly preparing for his own death. Yes, that Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, the advisor to Nero himself. Nero had ordered him to commit suicide after accusing him of conspiracy. Whether Seneca was guilty or not didn't matter. What mattered is how he faced the end. Now here's the wild part. Seneca doesn't panic, doesn't plead, doesn't curse the emperor or shake with fear. Instead, he gathers his friends, comforts his grieving wife, and delivers one final Stoic lesson, not with words, but with his life. He opens his veins, bleeds slowly, painfully, but stays serene, and his final act is this: he forgives, he encourages, he dies as he lived, calm, virtuous, free. Why? Because Seneca understood something most of us miss until it's too late. You don't control how long you live, but you do control how well you live. And when you live well, when you live with character, with integrity, with unshakable virtue, you die undefeated. Let that sink in. The entire empire could take his fortune, his titles, his life, but not his goodness. Now think about that in contrast to our world today. We fight like animals to protect our image, to keep up appearances, to win at any cost. But Stoicism asks, win what? Exactly? And for whom? If you win the world but lose your soul, what have you really won? This is why being a good person is more important than being rich. Because riches will demand more and more of you until there's nothing left but an empty shell. But goodness? It fills you from the inside. It multiplies as you give it away. It doesn't cost. It pays. In peace. In presence. In purpose. Let me give you a story you've never heard before. There's a woman I know named Sophia. She ran a small cafe. Nothing glamorous. No big online following. Just warm coffee, fresh bread, and a heart so big it felt like you were walking into a hug. She hired people no one else would. Ex-cons, recovering addicts, teen moms, not out of charity, but because she believed in second chances. And here's what blew me away. Every time someone tried to buy her out, offered to franchise the place, make it big, she said no. Why? Because if she scaled up, she'd have to let go of the personal touch, the mentorship, the slow conversations that saved lives quietly, over steaming mugs of tea. Sophia chose impact over income, and because of that, her community began to transform. A guy who used to steal now bakes muffins for kids in the neighborhood. A woman who once lived in her car now runs the register with pride. Not because of money, but because someone saw their goodness before their potential profit. And you know what Sophia told me once? I may not be rich in dollars, but I'm drowning in love. How do you even measure that kind of wealth? This is what Stoicism dares us to believe, that your goodness is enough. Even when no one applauds it, even when it costs you, even when it doesn't trend. You want to know something powerful? Goodness, true goodness, doesn't need an audience. It radiates like heat, quiet, invisible, but impossible to ignore. And that's exactly why it's more valuable than riches. Because while money can open doors, goodness walks through walls. It breaks barriers, heals wounds, and speaks a universal language the heart never forgets. Now let's turn the spotlight on you. Yes, you. What would your life look like if you made virtue your compass instead of profit? If every decision was filtered through, is this kind? Is this honest? Is this courageous? What if instead of asking, what do I get, you asked, who do I become? Imagine waking up every day, not with anxiety over metrics or money, but with clarity, knowing that no matter what the world throws at you, loss, betrayal, failure, you will remain steady, because your value is not in what you have, it's in what you are. That's the Stoic dream, not wealth, but worth. Let me leave you with one last story. There was a man, an old neighbor of mine, who passed away recently. He wasn't famous, never made $1 million. But when he died, the entire street showed up for his funeral. Grown men cried, kids wrote notes, strangers sent flowers. Why? Because this man had lived a life of consistent goodness. He helped fix people's roofs after storms, left groceries on doorsteps anonymously, taught kids how to ride bikes, never asked for thanks, just lived right. And in the end, he left behind something that not even billionaires can fake. Honor. That's the kind of legacy I want, don't you? You don't need to wait until the end of your life to have that kind of impact. You can start today, right now. Be good when no one's watching. Speak the truth even when your voice shakes. Forgive, not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. Hold doors open. Pick up trash that isn't yours. Apologize when you mess up. Stand up when others sit down. That's how we build a world worth living in. One act at a time. One good person at a time. And listen closely. You're not too small to make a difference. You're not too late. You're not too broken. You don't need to be rich. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to choose, over and over again, to be good. And that choice? That's the real flex. So as we close this journey, I want to leave you with one last quote, maybe the most powerful in all of Stoic thought, from Marcus Aurelius, who ruled the known world and still chose humility every day. A man's worth is no greater than the worth of his ambitions. Let your ambition be goodness. Let your riches be character. Let your life be the kind of story that lights someone else's path. Because when your bank account is empty, and your titles fade, and your face is forgotten, all that remains is who you were. Choose wisely. This has been why being a good person is more important than being rich. And now, the only question left is, what will you do with this truth?